They picked the nicest restaurant in Cedar Rapids to hide the plan in plain sight. Sea bass, crystal, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Maple Crest has knitting circles, Mom, my daughter said. My son added, a controlled environment. Translation, sign here, hand us the keys to your life. That night they set a little blue pill by my bed for sleep. I didn't swallow it. I tucked it into tissue and listened. From the kitchen, numbers, Elm Street, the fourplex, the laundromat, my name, spoken like a door they were about to close. Then came the note that changed everything. Not from my kids, from a stranger who actually cared. A sticky square from the pharmacist. Duplicate dosage? Please call me. Duplicate, as in double the sedation, half the questions. So I made calls of my own. A neighbor with slippers and backbone, an elder law attorney who talks like a calm storm, and someone whose badge means consequences. Next afternoon, my living room turned into a courtroom. Pens, forms, witness lines that didn't match, an audio recording I made with a cereal bowl as a speaker. They said love. The paper said transfer. I said a different word. No. Here's what they didn't expect. This story isn't about a nursing home. It's about a name, mine, and who holds the pen when families say help but mean control. Keep watching. Before the end, you'll know 3 things. How a springing power of attorney really works. How a sticky note can save a life, and how Harbor House was born from one word, no. Because dignity lives where the pen lives. The waiter set down the sea bass with a flourish and a whisper, the way they do when you're paying more for the ambiance than the food. Salted butter glowed on the crust, lemon slices fanned like sunshine, and the last of the Iowa light caught the crystals so every glass threw stars across our white tablecloth. My daughter Kelsey lifted her chin and smiled like a woman in a magazine ad, perfect, stiff, too many teeth. We booked a tour at Maple Crest, Mom. They have knitting circles on Wednesdays. You love to knit. My son Trent nodded like a bobblehead set too close to a subwoofer. My other son Drew didn't nod at all. He focused on the wine list as if the price of a Cabernet could explain away the tightness in his shoulders. He traced a finger along the options, lips moving with numbers, like math could make this dinner something other than what it was. I dabbed my mouth with the linen napkin and heard my mother's voice, clear as the church bell from All Saints on a Sunday. Folks show you who they are when money sits on the table. It had been 20 years since she passed, but she was loud in my head tonight, that woman who boiled ham hocks till they fell apart and taught me polite words can carry jagged edges. Knitting sounds thoughtful, I said, tasting the lie in my mouth while lemon butter melted against my tongue. Inside me, something old and important cracked. It was quiet, like ice shifting in a deep river. They had picked the nicest place in Cedar Rapids for this conversation, the one with the farm-to-table menu and servers who called you ma'am in that Midwest tone that's half respect, half performance. We sat near the window so the sunset could bless the charade, and I looked at my grown children, my freckles spread across 3 adult faces, and I understood fully and without drama that this was an execution without blood. Dr. Larkin says a memory care community would keep you safe, Trent added, voice dipped in concern the way donuts get dipped in glaze. A controlled environment. People my age? I asked lightly. Kelsey reached across and patted my hand, a little too fast, a little too hard. Her manicure was the same pale pink I used to paint on her toenails when she was 6, only now it cost more than my old grocery budget. Activities that make sense, Mom. It's too much for you. Houses, tenants, those rent checks. The houses. The duplex on Elm, the little fourplex near the community college, the coin laundromat on 16th where I learned cap rates off YouTube at 59, sitting on a plastic stool behind the counter while chili dogs dripped mustard onto my notes. The life I built after their father died, brick by stubborn brick, suspicion by spreadsheet. I had carried that life like fire in my hands, and I wasn't about to hand it to anyone just because they said controlled environment with a smile. Tomorrow morning, Drew said, eyes finally leaving the wine, we'll swing by with some forms, just signatures. Maple Crest needs them. Forms like what? I asked, my voice casual the way a cat is casual when it sees a bird. Just routine authorizations, Kelsey said, her thumb worried at the label on her bottle of Pellegrino until the green paper peeled and curled. The waiter brought creme brulee and a spoon for each of us. I cracked the glassy sugar with the back of my spoon and listened to that crisp little shatter. I thought about how small sounds can announce big changes. Babies cry, and your life splits in two. A garage door grinds up at midnight, and you know you won't sleep. A doctor clears his throat before saying a word you can't unhear. A spoon taps caramelized sugar, and you know your children are trying to usher you someplace where your name might stop belonging to you. We paid the check with a card I keep only for special occasions, milestones, graduations, anniversaries. I guess this qualified, but not in the way they thought. On the walk to the car, the air carried that clean late summer smell of cut grass and distant grill smoke. I wondered what dignity smelled like. I decided it was unscented, like a lotion that does its job without calling attention to itself. Kelsey drove me home in my own car, hands at 10 and 2, glancing over to check my expression as if it would give her a road map. It wouldn't. I had learned to keep my face still when I sat across tables from men who wanted to sell me things I already owned, service plans, insurance riders, a sense of safety for an extra fee. We pulled into my driveway and Kelsey turned off the engine but didn't open the door. She said, I know this is hard. We love you. I looked at her, my daughter. I thought of her at 5, crying because she stepped on a worm after the rain and thought it had feelings. I thought of her at 16, screaming that I was ruining her life because I wouldn't let her drive to Chicago with a boyfriend who thought turn signals were optional. I thought of her at 31, asleep on my couch with a feverish toddler on her chest while I tiptoed around with a basket of laundry that never shrank. Of course you love me, I said. That's the confusing part. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I hated that I loved her enough to notice that. Inside, the house smelled like onions and Murphy oil soap. I washed my floors every Friday like church, and I'd made a skillet of baked ziti for dinner, which sat now on the counter under foil, not touched by people too full of creme brulee to want real food. Kelsey followed me down the hallway like a well-meaning shadow. She opened my bathroom cabinet and took out a little paper cup and a blue pill. For sleep, she said, voice composed. You've been so anxious. I've been so aware, I said, but I took the cup and let the pill sit under my tongue while she watched me sip water. She kissed my forehead like she used to before school, my tall girl kneeling down to make it easier, and then she turned off my lamp and closed my bedroom door with that smooth caretaker's care. When her steps faded down the hall, I reached for a Kleenex, leaned over the side of the bed, and spit the pill into white tissue. I folded it into a little square and slid it into the pocket of my robe, next to a safety pin and a peppermint and a note I'd written to myself last winter that said, "Call Anita Patel if it ever feels like a storm is forming and my name is the umbrella." I lay still and listened. At 11:17 p.m., voices drifted from the kitchen. People who are plotting always talk late at night, as if darkness will soften the outlines of their words. "Elm Street's worth at least $250, Trent said, shuffling papers on my oak table. The same table where I signed my first deed 12 years ago, while Drew rolled his eyes and asked why I didn't just buy mutual funds like normal widows. "College fourplex," Kelsey said, "another $280, and the laundromat prints cash." "Power of attorney first," Drew said. "Larkin wrote that note about mild cognitive changes. Evans, the lawyer I found, said it'll help." There it was. Not help for me, help for the plan. I stood in the dark and let their math hit the walls. Numbers do that. They bounce and stick and stack themselves into shapes that block doorways. They didn't know I was listening. That's the thing about familiar houses. You can hear a whisper from the next room if you stand in the right spot and tilt your head just so. A quiet tap sounded at the side door off the mudroom. I padded down the hall in socks and opened it to find Ruthie Alvarez, my next-door neighbor, a woman whose laugh could lift fallen cake, whose hands had carried chicken noodle soup into my kitchen whenever my arthritis swelled my knuckles into walnuts. Ruthie held up a Walgreens bag and a long, flimsy receipt. Her hair was tucked into a bandana with little cherries on it. "She didn't take that pill, did you?" she whispered. "No." "Good." She pushed the receipt toward me with a finger that had a gold ring from a marriage that survived 4 kids and a factory layoff. "The pharmacist flagged it. Same dosage Dr. Larkin prescribed 2 months ago, but this refill's under Kelsey's login. He called me, knows I look in on you. He was worried." A sticky note clung to the receipt. "Duplicate dosage? Please call me. Mark, Farm D." That little square of paper held more care than the entire dinner had. Suspense snapped into clarity like a snapped clothespin. My breath went steady, not shallow. I suddenly felt like I could see every corner of my kitchen at once. The coffee maker with grounds still in the basket, the pile of mail on the counter, the bowl where I keep spare keys and quarters for the laundromat. "Ruthie, can you stay while I make a call?" "Baby, I brought my slippers," she said, pulling a pair of fuzzy slides out of her tote. "I'm not going anywhere." I dialed Anita Patel, an elder law attorney whose card I'd kept since she spoke at our church basement years ago about scams that happen in broad daylight and the way a nice pen can be sharper than a knife if you don't read what you're signing. "Mrs. Harper," she said, fully awake like all the real helpers are when phones ring at odd hours. "The night calls are always the important ones." "I think my kids are planning to love me into losing my name," I said. "Then we will put your name in ink so thick it bleeds through," she answered. By 8 a.m., Anita had me in her office with coffee big enough to float a canoe. Her lobby was calm in that deliberate way, muted chairs, a toy basket that meant she remembered people bring grandkids to legal appointments when they can't find a sitter. She wore a navy blazer and flats you could stand in all day, and she looked at me like she believed me before I said anything. She read the Walgreens note, skimmed through my binder of trust documents and warranty deeds and bank statements, and then tapped a sticky tab I'd labeled "years ago" in block letters. You set up a springing power of attorney, Evelyn, she said. It doesn't spring unless two independent physicians sign off, not friends, not Dr. Larkin alone. I exhaled for real. That exhale rolled my shoulders back down where they belonged. I forgot I did that, I said. You did it, she said, and you kept original deeds and bank statements? In a safe at the laundromat, under the spare belts for the big dryers. People don't look under belts. I also keep a laminated prayer card in there, so if somebody ever opens it, St. Jude can judge them first. Anita smiled. I like you, she said, and then her voice slid into work mode. She called Adult Protective Services. She called the county investigator who'd handled a case last year where a home aide tried to add her name to a joint account. Heads turned before the sun cleared the courthouse dome. On another line, she called Maple Crest and asked for the administrator's office and said words like public records and citations and policy review with a tone that made people take notes. This afternoon, Anita said, let them host a family signing at your place. We'll be there too. Mark, the pharmacist, will come if needed. The APS investigator wants to sit in. Should I be scared? I asked.
Be clear, she said. Scared is for people who don't know the truth. I left her office and drove to the laundromat. I unlocked the glass door, flipped the sign to open for the regulars who like to get ahead of the lunch rush, and breathe in that mixed smell of soap and hot metal. My little empire was humming, machines thudding shirts into submission, quarters clinking, two college kids hunched over a laptop doing math homework between rinse cycles. I went to the back room where the concrete floor buckles a little because the building's from 1978 and I like it that way, and I moved the box labeled belts. I pulled back the rug I put there so my knees don't get too cold when I kneel, and I spun the dial of the small safe that sits low and plain against the cinder block wall. Inside were the origin stories of a life. The original deed to Elm Street, creased where I folded it with shaking hands the day the realtor handed it over. The HUD-1 closing statements with numbers like mile markers down the side, the thick blue envelope with the trust papers I paid for in a year when I ate a lot of beans to cover the legal fees because beans are cheaper than probate. I pulled out the folder with the laminated tab that said POA and tucked it under my arm like a newborn. I stood up and looked through the doorway into the big room where the machine spun and the sunlight laid squares across the floor. A little boy pressed his nose to the glass of a front loader and watched socks slap the window. He laughed, that pure toddler laugh that sounds like the first 5 notes of every song. I tucked a 20 into the leave a load for someone jar by the change machine. I always do that on days I need reminding that money is a tool, not a prize. At 1:30, I drove home and made coffee and set it out like company was coming, because company was coming. I put out a plate of cookies I didn't bake, the kind with too much frosting that sticks in your teeth. I set the original documents in a neat stack by my own elbows. I smoothed the tablecloth over the oak and remembered the day we bought this table, my late husband and I, when the salesman said, "Solid wood is for people who plan to eat forever." And I thought, that's us. That's what we'll do. At 2 p.m., my front room turned into an accidental courtroom. Kelsey had laid out fresh pens beside a neat stack of forms. The pens matched the folders, color-coordinated like a school project. Trent had brought muffins from the farmer's market, the blueberry ones people pretend are healthy. Drew paced the rug into a path. The house itself felt like it was holding its breath. "Mom, here's the admission packet," Kelsey said brightly. "The community fee is $3,000, but we would take it out of the laundromat account," I finished. Her smile faltered. She looked at Drew. He looked at the door. The doorbell rang. Anita walked in with that navy blazer and Midwest calm that says, "I grew up with weather. I know how to stand still when the wind shifts." Behind her came Mark, the pharmacist, in his white coat, carrying his own copies of records like a shield. A woman with a badge followed. Early 40s, maybe. Dark hair and a simple ponytail and eyes that looked like they'd seen every story twice. She introduced herself as Maria from APS. She had a legal pad and a pen that clicked with conviction.
"Who are?" Trent started, but I spoke over him because this was my house. My lawyer, I said, my pharmacist, and someone whose business is keeping elders from being moved like furniture. Drew flushed. Mom, this is dramatic. Not as dramatic as the call we made to Maple Crest, Anita said, setting her bag on a chair. About their state citations last month. Kelsey's cheeks strained. What citations? The kind public records reveal. Over-sedation policy under review, short staffing. But don't worry, we brought the documents you actually need. Maria looked at the form stack my children had brought. May I? She flipped to page 3 and tapped 2 witness signatures. Both look similar. Same loop formations, same pressure. Kelsey blinked. Our neighbor Paige signed one, and I think I signed the other for Mom. Witnesses can't be immediate family, and they certainly shouldn't sign twice. Mark cleared his throat. Also about the blue pill, duplicate sedative dosage in the system. I flagged it and left a note. It's dangerous to double up, especially if there's any alcohol or if someone... We were trying to help her sleep, Kelsey said, voice thin as thread. Help me or help the paperwork? I asked. Silence sat with us at the table like a fourth child I never had. Outside, a mower droned, oblivious. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked like it knew names. Anita slid a fresh folder onto the table. She said, here is Evelyn's neuropsych evaluation from last week. Clean, competent. Here is a notarized affidavit stating she retained me months ago when she sensed something was off. Here are certified copies of her springing POA and trust. And, she set a little recorder on the table and clicked it on, an audio file from last night. I had set my phone down on the stairwell in a shallow bowl where sound collects. I learned that trick from a YouTube video about making speakers out of ceramic. The recording filled the room. We heard Trent tallying duplex equity. We heard Kelsey whispering that I was overwhelmed. We heard Drew say Larkin's note would grease it. Hearing your children narrate your vulnerability has a way of cutting through denial like a sharp blade through a rope that's been holding your heart in place. Maria lifted her eyes. Here's what happens next, she said. We can file a report. If we do, you'll face charges: attempted financial exploitation, attempted notary fraud, possible medication misuse. Or, if your mother wants, she can choose a restorative path. That's her call. They looked at me, all 3 of them, my grown babies who took their first steps on this very rug, who broke an arm falling off that banister, who ate macaroni and cheese at this table while I pretended not to be scared about the mortgage. It's funny how love can look like accusation if you don't squint right. It's not funny at all. My path, I said, and my voice was so calm it surprised me, starts with dignity. Mine and other women's. Anita nodded like she'd been waiting for that sentence to walk into the room. Tell them about Harbor House, she said. I've been waiting to say that name out loud. South side of town, a shuttered daycare I brought through a small LLC 2 years ago. It's turning into a daytime community. Classes, rehab, legal clinics for older women who get cornered by nice-sounding plans. I've hired a director. We open in 6 months. Kelsey's voice was a whisper. You what? I built something while you were counting, I said. I turned to Maria. If I choose restorative, it would look like this. They work at Harbor House for 4 years, not as bosses, as staff. Intake, kitchen, transportation. They learn names, not net worth. They finish financial counseling. They sit in every class we teach on what a power of attorney is and isn't. They help us put together binders for women who are scared and tired and smart and broke and all of the above. Trent swallowed. And if we refuse? Anita folded her hands. Then we file. Today.
Drew stared at the floor. Kelsey's lip trembled. Trent rubbed at the back of his neck like he could knead time into a different shape. I waited. I've learned that waiting tells you a lot about a person. When I negotiated for the laundromat, I made an offer and then sat quietly while the owner filled the silence with reasons I should get it cheaper. People confess to quiet.
Kelsey spoke first. "We'll do it," she said hoarsely. "We'll work." Trent nodded. Eyes wet, he didn't bother to hide. Drew took longer. He looked at his hands, and then at the door, and then at me. He shook his head. I can't work for a place that exists because you think I'm a villain. I said, it exists because I know how many Karens and Eileens and Marias out there don't have a Ruthie or an Anita or a Mark. You get to decide if you're a villain. He grabbed his keys. "Do what you want," he muttered, and left. Maria watched the door swing shut and then back again like it couldn't decide either. 2 out of 3, she said softly, will proceed with charges for 1, restorative contract for 2. I felt grief and relief collide like weather fronts over the river, turbulent, inevitable, oddly beautiful when you stand back far enough. That's the complicated math of motherhood. You can hold gratitude and anger in the same hand and call it Tuesday. 6 months later, Harbor House smelt like cinnamon toast and white rain hairspray. We painted the walls a color named Quiet Morning, which is exactly the kind we wanted to give women who had survived loud seasons. The big room that used to hold nap mats now hosted chair yoga at 10 and a Bring Your Mail, We'll Sort It Together clinic at noon. We put a donated piano in the corner and let anyone who knew 3 chords play Lean on Me until the song settled into the bones of the building. A retired judge taught a Wednesday talk called What a Notary Can and Cannot Do, and she brought cookies shaped like gavels the first day and laughed at herself while she handed them out. On Fridays, Mark came and did a brown bag med session where people brought in every medication bottle they owned and he read labels out loud with the patience of a kindergarten teacher. You'd be amazed how many lives get stitched back into place just because someone sat and sounded out words no one ever took time to explain. Kelsey worked the front desk and learned to say, Mrs. Coleman prefers Ms. Coleman, and mean it. She started a closet for interview clothes after seeing one woman show up to court in a pajama top. She labeled shelves, blazers, slacks, flats, and taped a handwritten sign above the door that said, "Take what fits your life." She started carrying safety pins in her pocket. She learned that safety pins are church in metal form. Trent handled transportation. He figured out which walker fits in a Corolla trunk and which ramp bites your ankle if you take it too fast. He made a spreadsheet for which turn lane to get into when you're driving to the county building at 8:15 a.m. on a Monday morning so you don't miss the parking lot that is, for no good reason, on the wrong side of a one-way. He learned to keep a cooler with extra water bottles in the back because sometimes court takes forever, and hydration is the difference between a meltdown and a miracle. We didn't talk about money for a long time, not the way we used to. We talked about Margaret's bone density scan and Angie's nephew trying to borrow her debit card and Ms. Lewis's landlord who finally fixed her heat after Trent called every day at 9 a.m. for a week like a rooster. We talked about dignity like it was a recipe we were perfecting. More salt, less sugar, simmer longer. On a snowy Tuesday in February, Drew's attorney called Anita and took a plea. He'd do community service, ironically some of it at Harbor House if I'd allow it. Anita relayed the message with her eyebrows up, like I expected me to slam the door on his face forever. I sat with it overnight, drinking chamomile tea at my kitchen table while the furnace hummed and the house sighed like an old friend who's seen things. I looked at the doodles on the wooden surface, the place where Drew carved his initials in the 6th grade with a fork, the ring from a coffee cup I used during a late-night cram session for my first real estate exam, the nick from the time Trent dropped a toolbox edge first. This table was a museum of our family's every day. Then I told Anita yes, not because Drew deserved it, because I deserved peace.
When Drew showed up for his first shift, he wore a hoodie and a face that tried not to show its relief. We started him cleaning the microwave. He worked up to intake forms. The day he took Mrs. Jackson's hand and said, "Tell me what you want to keep control of," I stepped into the hall and cried, with the private relief of a mother who knows the story might not end in a bow, but it also won't end in a police report. It wasn't all feel-good montage. We had the day a daughter screamed in our lobby that her mother was embarrassing the family by asking for help with her utilities. We had the afternoon the bank wouldn't let a woman close a joint account without her son present, even though she had the right paperwork and the right period. We had a week where a scammer in Florida called 10 of our ladies, pretending to be Medicare, and almost got their Social Security numbers. I wanted to drive to Florida and chew the ocean. On those days, Ruthie brought casseroles and sat in the break room telling stories about working second shift at the plant, about the year her youngest got pneumonia, and how you can love someone and still want to hide in the bathroom from them for 20 minutes. Mark brought a box of donut holes and passed them around like communion. Maria dropped by in her apps jacket and wrote down everything, like a woman building a case with bricks instead of paper. Small victories stacked like coins in a jar. We helped Miss Coleman change her phone plan so the grandson in jail calls couldn't get through. We printed out bank statements for Miss Ida and circled suspicious withdrawals in yellow highlighter while she muttered, "I knew it," and then told us stories about dancing to Sam Cooke in a kitchen that no longer exists. We taught 3 women how to put a pin on their debit cards, and they cried as if we'd handed them back something someone took. Maybe we had. Spring came, and the maples along our street leafed out so fast it looked like time-lapse. Trent passed his CDL and grinned like a 10-year-old with a new bike. He said, "We can get the bigger van." And then he did the thing I used to do. He went to a city auction and bid on a vehicle with too many miles and a good engine, and came home triumphant and greasy. He changed the oil himself in the parking lot while Kelsey stood watch, and told anyone who asked that, yes, we knew what we were doing, thank you. Kelsey started sleeping. Really sleeping, the kind of where your face goes soft and your shoulders stop trying to hold your ears in place. She cried in my office one afternoon after a woman with a fresh bruise on her forearm hugged her and said, "You're the first person to look at me like I wasn't a problem to be solved." Kelsey cried and then blew her nose and went back to the front desk to greet the next person with a hello that had more in it than politeness. We hosted a Saturday clinic called Bring Your Mail, and our lobby filled with grocery bags and shoeboxes of envelopes. We stacked them on tables and we opened them and we made piles. Junk, urgent, needs a call, needs a shred. We taught people to look for the small print that says, "This is an advertisement," and the bigger print that says, "Final notice," when it's actually the first notice. We set up a shredder in the corner and let women feed in papers they didn't understand in the first place, watching confetti spit out the other side with the kind of satisfaction you usually only get from good pie. On a warm Tuesday in June, Maria stopped by with news. She said, "Elder exploitation in the county is down this year. I can't prove it's you. I also can't prove it isn't." I wanted to bake a cake for a statistic. Instead, we ate watermelon on paper plates on the back steps, juice running down our wrists, and let the sticky sweetness stand in for a party. That night, I sat on my own back stoop with a plastic plate of deviled eggs and let the cicadas sing. The sky turned that in-between color that happens right before full dark, and the neighbor's porch light clicked on, and somewhere a teenager's bass thumped. Trent walked out and handed me a folded paper. He said, "I passed the CDL, even though I knew. We can get the bigger van." Kelsey followed with a binder labeled volunteer schedule in a tidy hand. She said, "We have teenagers coming from the high school to read tech scams aloud to our ladies. They think fishing is a sport." We laughed. Then we didn't. Then we did again, because that's what families do when they're figuring out how to be honest. "Do you ever think about changing the will?" Kelsey asked. "Not for us, for Harbor House."
"It already is changed," I said. "The laundromat goes into a perpetual fund. The duplex rent pay for counseling hours. My house becomes transitional housing for women standing back up. I bought a second lot next door to the daycare, now us, and someday, when I'm gone, it'll all be one thing, one long thread you can't break." Kelsey looked past me at the sunset, laying a band of pink across the horizon like a sash. "That's better than inheritance," she said. "It is inheritance," I said, "the kind that spins itself on something worth more than granite countertops." One Sunday in October, I stood in the church lobby with a plate of cookies and watched Drew stand by the coffee urn and talk to Mrs. Jackson's son with his hands open, palms up. He'd learned that from Anita. Open hands show you aren't hiding anything. We want to make sure your mom keeps control over her decisions, he said. You can help by listening instead of deciding. Mrs. Jackson's son nodded. It was small. It was everything. The last week of the year, Kelsey came into my office with a shoebox. She set it on my desk like it weighed 100 pounds. I found something you should see, she said. Inside lay the birthday cards I'd saved from their little years, thick construction paper with crooked hearts and glitter that still fell off after 2 decades. Trent found these in Drew's garage, she said, from when we cleaned your basement. He was supposed to bring them back and never did. I ran my fingers over the edges where little hands had pressed too hard with blunt scissors. My throat did that tight thing grief and joy take turns causing. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered, for all of it. I was scared of losing you and greedy about what you built, and I hid both under the word help. There it was, the truth without a bow, the kind of apology that stands up straight on its own 2 feet. You can't rebuild trust with speeches, only with calendars, I said gently. I know, she said. I'll be here tomorrow. So she was, and the day after, and the day after that. Calendars make better apologies than roses. I've learned that forgiveness often looks like a sign-in sheet. Harbor House churned 2, and then 3. We grew into our roles. We outgrew our waiting room and then our patience on a few bad days when people said, why don't they just move to a cheaper place? As if lives can be boxed and shipped like winter clothes. We built a garden out back with raised beds at chair height and grew tomatoes that tasted like July. We got a small grant from a local foundation that came with a ceremony where people clapped politely. And then we went back to work because dignity doesn't clap for itself. It just shows up. We held grief groups for women whose kids lived 3 miles away and hadn't visited in 3 years. We printed out obituaries and read them out loud when someone's friend passed, and the family didn't tell her because they didn't think she could handle it. We sent sympathy cards and cooked casseroles and created a ritual where we wrote down the names of people we loved on slips of paper and folded them into paper cranes that hung from the ceiling in the lobby like a flock of promises. Trent messed up sometimes. He missed a pickup once when he read the time wrong and found a woman sitting on her stoop with a little bag and a lot of disappointment. He drove there anyway and apologized so sincerely, the woman told him she forgave him before he finished the sentence. He learned to double-check. He taped a little card to the dashboard with his own notes in block letters like a child. Left turn at the blue mailbox? No, the other blue mailbox. Kelsey got tricked once. A man came in slick as oil, asking to speak to his aunt and asking whether her papers were complete. He said all the right words. She almost told him too much, and then she didn't because she stopped and pictured Maria's face and heard Anita's voice. She said, "You'll need to make an appointment." And when he got flustered, she walked to the back and whispered to me, "I almost," and I said, "You didn't." And we both stood there for a second, breathing like swimmers who just surfaced. Drew had days where he hated us and days where he didn't. He did his community service hours, and then he did more because he was there and people were there, and there's a gravity to service that can keep a person in orbit if they let it. He sat with a woman named Eileen who was trying to decide whether to sell the house her husband had built with his brother in 1973, the one with the hunting prints in the hallway and the pantry full of expired cream of mushroom. He said, "Tell me what you want to keep control of." And she set the back porch. And somehow he made that into a plan. We finished our 4th year, and Maria brought cupcakes with carrot shavings you could see. She said I ran the numbers again. Calls like yours, calls where family steps in with pens, are still down. People are talking. Word is you all scare the slick ones just by existing. I didn't want to be scary. I wanted to be inevitable. I wanted us to be like mail. Of course we come. Of course we bring what you need. Of course we carry your name correctly to the place you want it to land.
On a breezy June day, the mayor stopped by with a plaque from the county. It read, "Harbor House, for restoring dignity, one paper, one person at a time." We didn't do a ribbon because ribbons feel like the finish line of something you never finish. We set the plaque on a shelf next to a ceramic handprint a woman made at a craft day and a photograph of Ruthie holding a pan of lasagna like a trophy. I gave a short speech because I've learned long ones don't make memories, they just make noise. "Family," I said, "isn't who tells you to rest. It's who hands you the pen and says, 'It's your name. You sign where you want.'" We served sheet cake from Hy-Vee and black coffee in styrofoam cups. It tasted like victory and also like a PTA meeting, which is perfect if you think about it. This isn't the kind of work that ends with fireworks. It ends with somebody getting their mail and understanding it, with somebody keeping the house key in their own pocket. A week later, Drew came into my office and shut the door carefully. He sat in the chair across from me and looked at the framed photo of their father on my bookshelf, the way people look at someone they've disappointed and also learned from. "I want to say something," he started, and I held up my hand because apologies shouldn't be coaxed. He said it anyway. "I'm sorry for wanting to speed up your life because I was impatient for the part where I benefit. I'm sorry for calling control love. I'm sorry for thinking I knew better. I'm sorry for thinking money would make me feel safe, and I'm sorry for blaming you when it didn't." I nodded. I have learned that apologies land better on nods than on lectures. "What are you going to do tomorrow?" I asked. He smiled a little and answered the only way that matters. "Take Miss Jackson to her doctor, then help Eileen call the roofer about the back porch, then label files, then wipe down the microwave." Calendars, not roses. At home that night, I took the binder with my estate plan out of the hall closet and set it on the table. I updated the section that leaves the laundromat to the harbor fund and the duplex income to weekly counseling hours and the house to transitional housing. I added a page that named Kelsey as Director of Operations, Trent as Transportation and Logistics Lead, and Drew, pending board approval, as Family Liaison, a title he didn't know he needed. I sealed it back in the big blue envelope and slid it in the hall closet behind the extra toilet paper and the emergency candles. That's where legacies belong. In reach, in the path of everyday life, ready to be picked up by someone who knows how to hold them. We had a summer of good peaches and 2 new volunteers who both could work a spreadsheet like a symphony. We painted the hallway and the back a sunshiny yellow because a woman named Loretta said it made her knees hurt less to walk toward a warm color. We started a little book club with large print novels and hot tea. We celebrated a 93rd birthday with cupcakes and a playlist from 1949. And when Blue Moon came on, 2 women waltzed in their chairs like queens. On our 5th anniversary, we did what we always do. We opened the door, put on a pot of coffee, and waited to see who needed a pen. People came. People always come when your sign says dignity lives here, and you mean it. That afternoon, for once, I left early. I drove to the laundromat because the dryer belts needed my hands, and the scent of hot cotton settles my mind. I sat on the little stool behind the counter and watched a load of towels spin, white and clean and simple. A young mom came in with a basket and a look on her face I recognized from 1,000 mirrors, tired but moving anyway. I helped her carry quarters. I gave her a coupon for a free wash that I keep in the drawer for moments just like that. She said thank you with her whole face. When I got home, the sun laid a gold stripe across my driveway, and Ruthie waved from her porch, a dish towel draped over her shoulder. She shouted, "I made banana bread," and I shouted back, "Save me a corner piece." And that's what the end of a day should sound like. I sat on my back steps and let the cicadas sing me the old, faithful song they've been singing since before my grandmother was born. And I thought about what we've built and what we're still building. I thought about how close I came to having my name lifted off my life like an old label, and how a pharmacist's sticky note, and a neighbor's slippers, and a lawyer's calm voice, and an investigator's steady eyes, and a mother's stubborn heart changed the ending. Love without respect is control in costume. I know that now, the way I know how long a full load of towels to dry. The measure of a family isn't how quickly they can move you into a room with crafts. It's how fiercely they guard your name while you're still here to say it. Tomorrow we'll open the door again. There will be mail to sort and vans to load, and a woman who brings in a stack of envelopes with a face that says she'd like to understand her life better. There will be teenagers in our lobby mispronouncing fishing and then pronouncing it right. There will be coffee and mistakes and forgiveness on calendars and the kind of laughter that shakes out the dust. I'll put on my Harbor House name badge even though everybody recognizes me anyway, and I'll answer the phone, and I'll sign my name on a form where it belongs, and I'll hand another pen across another table to another woman and say the line I never get tired of saying. It's your name. You sign where you want.